Good morning, everyone. I hope you're all doing well. I am still recovering from Adobe Max last week. Did you catch the news? I certainly did. And it was incredibly exciting. There was updates to XD, Photoshop, Illustrator, After Effects, the whole 9 yards. Hope you're all doing well. We have a ton of people in the chat. Anne, Pivoter, David. How's everyone doing? Let me know where you're from. I'm streaming right now live from San Francisco in the Adobe office down here, up here in San Francisco. And we have a huge week packed. We have, I'm kicking off UI and UX week here at Adobe. And I'm starting off today with getting started in Adobe XD. So if you are just getting started in XD, not quite sure how it works, you want to learn a little bit more, I'm your guy. So we're going to definitely dive in. It's going to be more of a basics lesson, but we're definitely going to be covering some of the new features that were announced just last week, including auto-animate, Illustrator importing, which is super cool. We might touch on link symbols, voice support, and we already have some questions, which is great. Keep those questions coming. I'm going to try my best to answer some of those as we go through. And we have a packed schedule this week. We have Peter, Evan, and Michael coming in, and they're all going to be designing really cool stuff throughout the week. I'm going to be hosting Peter and Michael, and our fantastic Gus, also known as GusBot, is going to be hosting Evan. So definitely stay tuned. Tomorrow, Wednesday, and Thursday will be here all week. We also have DJ Paco in the studio, making sure all the transitions are working smoothly and my audio sounds great. He does a great job over here. And he's also in the chat, chatting along. So it's great to see Jason. Great to see everyone here. I saw there was a question, but I missed it. Just keep asking those questions and I will definitely do my best to answer. So today we're going to be designing an app. And we're going to be designing, I'm going to make you all hungry. We're going to be designing a burger app, sort of like a mobile, just burgers type of app. And I'm going to be showing you how exactly Adobe XD works. And if I hop over to my screen here, what I love to do before I even dive into any project is really look for some inspiration. And two websites really come to mind is Behance and Dribbble, two of my favorite websites that I'm browsing pretty much all day. And on Behance, where we're streaming right now, if you go to behance.com/live, you can chat away. If I go over to the Discover tab and then UI and UX, I can actually start searching. I can just search burgers if I wanted to, and it'll basically give me apps and websites and you know UI and UX stuff that's related to burgers, which is great, but it's also terrible because it makes me very hungry. So I can just browse here and kind of get ideas. And if you're definitely just starting out, maybe not doing it commercially, you know, look at some of these stuff and maybe copy some. Obviously, if you're doing it commercially, maybe you don't want to copy, but it's really exciting and just like, you know, get inspiration. Also, Dribbble is a great place. And I have a few concepts that I'm kind of looking at for this design. This one, it's a food recipes app, so it's not exactly what we're going for, but it has some interesting elements like the repeat grid, which we'll be talking about. This one here, it's an onboarding screen, very simple. We have a food delivery platform, also some interesting elements. And this one over here, I really like, and we're gonna be looking at auto-animate and how we can do something very similar to this. We'll see if it works out. I haven't tried this yet, but we're gonna try it live on stream. So without further ado, let's go ahead and hop into Adobe XD. And if you've never used XD at all, this is kind of what you'll see for the first time. You'll see a few templates that you can start with. Whether you have an iPhone or an Android device, an iPad, if you're designing for web, or if you want to do a custom size, you can do that as well. And if you're just getting started, there's a great tutorial that you can start right here. And if you have been using XD, there are your recent documents are down below, which is great. So I'm gonna hop into, we're gonna start off with an iPhone 6, 7, 8 artboard, and here's XD. And what you'll notice is that a lot of this is very familiar. And hey, Chris, nice to see you. Chris and I hung out a lot at Adobe Max last week, which is, I hope you're still recovering, Chris. I hope you're not recovering. I hope you are recovered. So you'll notice that a lot of XD looks very familiar, whether you've been using Photoshop or Illustrator or whatever it might be. You got your tools on the left, you have your properties on the right, and you have your artboard smack dab in the middle. And you can also hop back and forth between design and prototype mode right at the top. You can also use the Control-Tab shortcut to make that happen. So we're gonna get going. The first screen that we're gonna be designing is a very simple home screen. something that viewers will just open up the app and they'll land on this screen. It's gonna basically consist of an image, some text, and a button that goes to the next screen. So for the image, now there's two ways you can do this. You can hop over to Finder, and if I go into, I have a folder just of burgers, which is, again, making me very hungry. I have a bunch of burgers that I grabbed from Unsplash. And if I grab this and drag this in, it's gonna be massive. And if I press Command 0 or Command 3 to see the whole thing, it's a large image. I could go ahead and shrink this down, but for images that are large, what I love to do is really, I have a note. Is night shift on? I don't know. That's a good question.
You want to look at it?
It is a little bit warm.
Yeah. I don't know if it's Mojave or it's...
Interesting.
You can't find it.
Well, let me know if you're watching. Let me know in the chat if the screen looks a little bit warm, because it definitely looks a little bit warm on our end. Let's see if I have night shift on.
Should be under what are displays?
Display.
And then it should be under night shift.
True tone. That's probably it, right?
Yeah. Let's turn that off. There it is.
Aha. We've cooled it down. Much better. See, this is why Paco's around, because I don't notice these things. So here we go. Back to work. What I like to do, so to recap a little bit, so I grabbed the image, dragged it in, and it was massive. And I obviously don't want that. So what I like to do is use masks instead, and you can use shapes as masks. So if I drag out a shape just on this artboard, just like this, I'm gonna go ahead and turn off the border. We don't need a border. So we basically have a shape, and if I change the color just so you can see, you have a shape. And I can go ahead and name this in my layers panel, background. And you can rename shapes just like you can in Photoshop or Illustrator. But what's cool about this is if I go back to Finder and I grab the same image and drag it, you're gonna notice it's now turning blue. And if I drop that in there, it masks it and automatically resizes it based on that shape. So I don't have to worry about zooming out and shrinking that thing down. It just does it for me, which is fantastic. And I love that. And then if you double click on it, if you do want to make it a bit bigger, double click to enter the mask and scale it up. Just like that. So we now have an image inside of our artboard, which we're gonna name. I always forget to name my artboard. You can just simply double click on the top, and I'm gonna name this home screen. And I'm gonna spell it correctly, home screen, there we go. And now I wanna add some text right at the top. So I'm gonna grab my text tool, simply click, and let's type out just burgers, all in caps. I could manually move this to the center and you'll notice it does lock, but if I have it anywhere else and I just want to center it horizontally at the very top of my document, if I zoom in here, or top of my application, I have these lovely align options, and I can press horizontal or align center horizontally and it'll do it for me. So I don't have to worry about that. I can also justify that center in my text properties to the right. So I'm gonna grab, let's say, Avenir Next is a great font. I love that font. Change the color to white. Let's go for a nice heavy set font. And I could go ahead and increase the size of the text right here to the right, but also we have this handy dandy little handle at the bottom. I can just pull it up and I have a much larger font. And I may actually, woo, I scrolled way out. Command 3, Command 0, there we go. Let me drop this down to bold so it's not too heavy. There we go. And I'm gonna increase the character spacing quite a bit. That looks pretty good. Leave it there. So now I really like this text, right? And I may wanna use this throughout my document on other artboards. And hey Lee, welcome. Welcome to everyone else who is joining, Vanessa, CX. So I may wanna use this text throughout my other artboards. So let me hop over here down to the bottom. And we have these two options. The first one, which is active right now, it's my layers. And then we have our assets. And this is where you will store your text, your character styles, your colors, and even symbols that you're gonna be using throughout your project, right? So because I have a text layer selected, I can simply click on the plus button beside character styles, and it's gonna add that directly in my assets panel. So if I want to continue using that in other artboards, I can simply select a text layer and click on it. But what's even cooler is if I had multiple text layers throughout the document that use this character style, and I decide, you know what, I'm not a big fan of this, I can simply right click on it, press edit, and then make those changes. So if I wanted to change this to Comic Sans, a great font, I can easily do that, and it will update on all of them. Now, of course, no one likes Comic Sans, so I'm gonna get rid of that. So we're gonna move on. We're gonna add a small button at the bottom of this artboard. We're not gonna make the home screen too crazy. So I'm gonna grab my rectangle tool, drag out a button at the bottom, just like this. Again, I'm gonna make sure to center it in my document. And I may wanna round out the corners. Papyrus, Jason, Papyrus is another great font. Except not really. I may want to round out the corners of this button. So you could do that in one of two ways. You can either go over here to the properties and change the radius on this side. You can also change the radius of individual corners, which is great. Or right on this button on a rectangle, you can grab these little handles that are on the inside of the shape and just drag these in, and it'll round out the corners for you, which is great. It makes it very handy. I'm going to turn off my border, and I now have a very simple white button. I'm going to make it a little bit more narrow. And then inside there, I'm going to type out, let's make my text blackish. I can't see my text. Where did my text go? Text. There we go. Hungry, get started. Now, obviously, I don't want that character spacing. It's a little bit too much for that button. I'm gonna fill this. Let's make it nice and dark, but not too dark. And then decrease the size and position it on my button. Beautiful. Now, in my layers panel, I do want to make sure to group these two so my layers don't get too messy. So if I hold down my Shift key, I can select the second layer, and then Command or Control G, and then rename it. Button. Now, if I did think I was going to be using this button throughout my document somewhere else, I can hop back into my Assets panel and then press Symbol, the plus button beside Symbol, and that will allow me to use this button elsewhere. I probably won't be using this exact button, but just so you know exactly how that works. So, beautiful. We have a home screen. That's all we're going to do on this home screen. We don't want to get too crazy, but we do want to create another artboard that's going to house our menu. So, over here to the left, I have my artboard button, symbol, icon. And if I just simply click on my document, it's going to create an artboard that's the same as the previous artboard. Or I can go over here to the right and choose a different artboard if I wanted to. But I do want an iPhone 6, 7, 8, and I'm going to name this Menu. Beautiful. So on this artboard, we want a few elements. We want basically like a header section with some text, maybe a search box. And then we also want menu items. Obviously, all the amazing burgers that are available at this make-believe burger place. And we're going to be doing that with a repeat grid. We also want a navigation bar at the bottom so the user knows exactly where they're going throughout this application. So we're going to start off with a header at the top. I'm just going to drag out a rectangle just like this. Doesn't have to be the entire document. And I'm gonna change the fill just so I can see this against the background, turn off the border. And for this, we're gonna use a little bit of a gradient. I actually have a folder of gradients that I downloaded. I believe I found it on Behance. And let's go ahead and grab this guy here. And just like in the previous example, when you drag it in, it automatically resizes to that shape. And if you needed to, you can make it bigger, you can make it smaller. And you can also make a very similar gradient using the fill options within Adobe XD. Why don't you create notification panel of iPhone because app may vary on use? Not sure what you're referring to there. If you clarified that, I'll definitely try to answer that. So we have a little header, and then at the top, we're gonna add some more text. This one's gonna say on the menu, just so the user knows exactly what screen they're looking at. Make it a little bit smaller. Avenir Next bold looks pretty good. And then right below that, we want a slightly... Alex says, can you talk about the difference between XD and Sketch? Possibly, but probably not during the stream. But there are definitely some differences, but we've introduced a lot of features recently that I think a lot of Sketch users will really like. Actually, they are liking. So I'm gonna drag out a search bar. I'm gonna drag a rectangle right here. I'm gonna round the corners just a tiny little bit. I don't want it too much, just to give it a little bit of flair, and turn off the border. So this is going to be for our search box. And then I'm going to write the word search. Probably don't want bold. Let's go for regular, see what that looks like, and drop down. There we go. And we also need a search icon. So this can be easily, you can either use an icon. I do have a folder of icons here, and if I have a search icon here, but I'm gonna make my own. And you can really make a lot of icons, even with the simple tools like the ellipse and the rectangle, you can make some pretty cool icons. So I'm simply gonna drag out an ellipse right here, holding it down my shift key to constrain it to make sure it is a perfect circle. And then I have a line tool. I can just drag out like this. And then over here, let me center that. And if I select both of them, I can change the size of the width of this shape at the same time. Beautiful. And I'm going to make sure to make this the same color. And again, just like the text, I can hop into my assets panel and make sure that I have colors, press colors, and then it adds both of those directly to my assets panel. So I can reuse these colors very easily throughout my document. And if I wanted to, I can rotate this just a little bit and make sure that I'm gonna try to keep my layers grouped and organized. But by the end of this stream, they'll probably be all over the place. Search. All right, beautiful. So we have, I'm gonna make this a little bit smaller, it's a little bit too big. Great. So now we have a little header area, we have text that says on the menu, we have a search box, and now we need to start to add some actual content. So to do that, again, we're gonna make another rectangle, and you're noticing, let me zoom in here. You're noticing as I'm moving my mouse, even though I haven't dragged and created anything, we have these smart guides that are appearing that will actually allow us to very easily line up elements on our document. So if I want to line up this new rectangle with the search bar at the top, I can easily do that, and it appears on this side as well. So I'm gonna drag one out, let's say that large there, change the color just for now. And we now have, this is basically gonna house all of our delicious burgers. So we're gonna have an image of a burger right here. We're also gonna have some text. So we'll just put burger name for now. All right, we'll make that white. Let's make this a little bit darker so we can see that. Make it bold, and whoops, and a little bit smaller. And then right underneath, if I hold down my Alt or Option key and drag downwards, I can duplicate this, and I will add the price. Make this one a little bit less bold, and line it up to the left. Again, those smart guides are moving around to help us exactly position where we want it to. Beautiful. Now, before I get distracted, I am going to make sure to group all of this and burger item. So now we have basically an element that we want to be repeated throughout the document, right? So we could go ahead and duplicate this over and over and over again and then, manually update it, but it's a bit of a pain. So what we're going to do is we're going to be utilizing repeat grids, which is fantastic. And so I have this group selected, which contains all of the items. We have the price, we have the burger name, and we have a rectangle for the background. And with that selected, over to the right here, I have the repeat grid option. When I press that, you're going to notice that we have these new handles, these green handles at the top and the bottom. And what I'm able to do is I can pull these out to create repeated elements on my document. So I want this to go down the document vertically. So I'm going to just grab this one at the bottom and simply pull them out just like this. I'm going to make, let's say, 4 of them down the document. And I now have repeated elements. So, and I can move my mouse in between each of them, and I have this pink area, which allows me to drag and adjust the spacing in between them, right? The spacing looks pretty good. I'm gonna make it a little bit narrower. And what's even cooler about repeat grids is that you can go in and make changes and it'll update throughout the entire thing. So if I wanted the corners of this rectangle to be a little bit rounder, right? Instead of having to go through and updating every single one, I can simply make them round on one of them, and you're noticing it updates them for all of them. The same works with text. So I can grab this text layer, move it, let's say I wanted it centered, and it updates on all. Of course, I want it over there to the left. But what's really nice about repeat grids is it also works really well with images. So back in Finder, I have, back in my burgers folder, I have a bunch of images. So I'm gonna grab one burger. Let me make these larger so you can see, and you can get very hungry. So I'm gonna grab this burger here. Let's grab this one too, that one, and this one at the bottom. So I can simply grab these images and drag them onto any one of these rectangles. And it's automatically gonna populate throughout the repeat grid, which is super simple. And then you can go in and text can be overridden. So I can name this, let's say, let me make sure this is left justified and move this over. Let's call this the Beast. What is that? Is that turkey on there? Is that bacon? I don't know. The bacon burger. This one looks like a veggie burger. And this one might be a Halloween burger, so let's call it Halloween. And the veggie burger, because it's probably a lot more expensive, it'll be $14.95. So text layers can easily be overwritten. Images can easily be overwritten. But we're noticing a little bit of a problem, is that if we press play to see our prototype, we can't really scroll right now. So if I select my artboard, and then over here to the right, oh no, yeah, over here to the right, we have vertical and none. So vertical is selected. So what we're able to do is simply grab this handle at the bottom and drag this down so we have a longer viewport. And now if we press play, we can basically start to scroll and see all of our burgers, right? Which is great. And we have this handle over here to the right, to the left. That basically tells us that everything above the handle is going to be visible above the fold, and everything below will be visible when you scroll, which is great. Now, very quickly, we're going to create a little bit of a navigation bar, again, so the users know exactly where they are on this document or in the app. So I'm going to create a rectangle right at the bottom, making sure it lines up with the fold, just like this. Doesn't matter if it extends off your artboard. All right, and we're gonna have basically 3 items. We're gonna have a menu, which is what we're on right now. We're gonna have a build it your own, a burger section, and then something for the cart. So I'm actually gonna go back over to Finder, and I have my icons here, just so I don't waste too much time. I have a burger icon. This looks like a great icon. Whoops. I'm gonna drag this one out here. I also have a menu icon. And again, these icons are very easy to make directly in Adobe XD, but just to save some time, definitely utilize icons if you have them. And I have a shopping cart icon right here. And you can just drag them, they're SVGs, you can just pop them right into Adobe XD and you can start using them. Now this one, let me line up the burger centered on the document and the cart. And what you're gonna notice is as I drag this horizontally, in a second, there's these pink boxes that appear. That basically tells me that this cart icon is the same distance that the burger icon is from the menu icon. So there's a lot of these smart elements that will appear as you're designing that'll really help you line things up if you don't want to do it manually or you're not worried about math and things like that. Now these two here, the burger ones, I'm actually going to set this to my gray color. I'm gonna hop over to my assets, simply press that, and it's gonna automatically fill them. And this one here, this is gonna be the active item. So let's go ahead and set this to somewhat of a reddish orange, just like that. So that's the menu icon. We have a burger icon and we have a cart icon. Beautiful. Now, what you're gonna notice when I press play to preview this, as I start scrolling, the navigation bar also scrolls, and obviously we don't want that, right? So in our layers panel, I'm going to make sure to select all of the layers that make up my navigation bar. Make sure to group them because I'm getting a little bit disorganized. Navigation bar. And over to the right, we have the magical fix position when scrolling. I'm clearly not awake yet. And if we press that and then preview this document, as we scroll, that navigation bar remains fixed to the bottom of our app. Now we're noticing I also can't see the whole Halloween burger. So in that case, because there's a fixed element down there, we can just grab the whole artboard, make it a little bit larger, kind of to make up for that space at the bottom. And now we can see everything, which is great. Beautiful. This looks great. So that's the menu, that's the navigation, and that's the repeat grid, which I would definitely recommend using repeat grids if you are able to. So the next artboard we're going to make, actually I want to get to the good stuff first. I was going to have another screen that shows details of the selected burger. We might get to that, but I want to make sure I get in some auto-animate goodness and some importing for illustration from Illustrator. So we're going to make one more artboard right over here, and we're going to tackle basically what's going to be this icon. This is going to be the build your own burger, right? So I'm going to grab this navigation bar, copy it, paste it over here, and very quickly change the fill and change the fill. I can also use my assets panel for this, but that's easy too. And at the top, we're going to make some text, make it, oh, I can't see anything. I also can't spell. Make it yours. And I'm going to make the entire thing much larger. Make sure to center this. And I'm going to make just the word yours a little bit bigger as well. Great. And then adjust the line spacing. Let's say 60, almost. Beautiful. Now, here comes the fun part. Basically, if I go back over to Safari, I want to do something like this, where there's a burger on the screen and then it transitions into this flyout of this burger so you can kind of pick and choose what, I was going to say elements, but we're not talking design, what ingredients and what condiments and toppings you have on your burger. I think it'll be kind of fun. Again, I haven't done this yet, so this might be interesting. So over here in Finder, I have this Illustrator file somewhere. I do have a file, I promise. In my assets, here we go. Found it. So I have this Illustrator file, which I grabbed from Adobe Stock, which is basically, it just contains a bunch of pieces to a burger. It has some buns, has an egg, some lettuce, whatever it is. And it's all vector, because it was all done in Illustrator. And there's no magic that has to be done. There's no weird options you have to choose to get something into Adobe XD from Illustrator, whether it's Illustrator or Photoshop. You just grab it, drag it down to the XD icon, and it opens in a second. And there you go. And if I hop into my layers, there's groups, and all the paths that make up this vector file are here, which is really cool. I love the fact that we can now take Illustrator files and bring them directly into Adobe XD, because a lot of people create icons or just any sort of graphics in Illustrator, and now you can open them in XD, which is great. So we're not going to be using all of this, but we definitely want a few of these items. Let's say this bun, this one. We'll probably use some pickles. Let's go. You want an egg? Do you put eggs on burgers? I don't, but some people do. Let's go for some cheese. The ones with the hole looks pretty good, and maybe some ketchup. So we have all of these selected. I'm going to simply group them just so I know that these are the ones I'm going to be using. And if I copy this, I can go back over to my document and simply paste it. And now we have all of these. You know what? I'm missing meat. That's kind of important for a burger. I mean, although unless you're vegetarian, then you don't need meat, but I like meat on my burgers. There we go. So we have now all the elements that make up this burger. We're actually gonna start putting, and if I missed anything else, let me know. And we're gonna start putting this together. Let me make this a little bit bigger. Here's the bottom bun. And we'll put some meat. Actually, do we need the second bun? No, let's get rid of the second bun. Put some pickles, and we can rearrange these very easily in our layers panel. Ketchup at the top. We've got some cheese. We'll put that over top of the pickles, or underneath the pickles. Who puts cheese on top of pickles? That's weird. And some... You know what? Let's go ahead and add some lettuce as well, just so we have some more options. Make that a little bit larger. Put the ketchup on top of the lettuce, because we're barbaric like that. And then the burger, the topping, there we go. So we've basically been able to grab an Illustrator file that was created completely in Illustrator, dragged it into Adobe XD. We have all these elements, and we're able to grab these, put them on our other document, and now we're just using them as if it was all designed in... You're missing cheese. I have cheese, Jason. There's cheese. And you can make this larger, you can make this smaller, whatever you like. So here is our burger, right? And just like in this prototype, we want this to kind of like fly out. So let's actually make a button at the bottom that says build it. We'll use the same red as we're using. I should probably add that to my assets panel. So I'm gonna go over to assets before anyone yells at me. Press color, and now I don't need a border. And now I have that red in my assets panel. I'll make the corners rounded just like my other button. And I'm gonna type out build it. Beautiful. So at this point, what I want to happen is when someone presses the build it button, just like in this prototype, the burger explodes, and then you can basically choose what items you want or what items you don't want. So let's make this happen, right? Put the burger right here, make it yours as centered. Beautiful. So there's screen one. And the way auto-animate works in Adobe XD is that it looks at the differences between your two screens and intelligently animates the differences, right? So if in this screen here, the burger looks like this, and in the next screen, it's kind of all flied out, it's gonna realize that and make that animation. All right, so let's make it happen. I'm gonna duplicate this artboard, hold down my Option key, drag it over to the right, and you're noticing those same smart elements appear on the screen. Now in this one, I wanna make this text a little bit smaller. So I'm gonna put it up here. Actually, you know what? I probably don't even need that text, do I? I'm gonna decrease the opacity. Now in here, this is where things get fun. I'm gonna put the patty up here. I'm gonna put the ketchup, lettuce, pickles, cheese, I'll leave it right about there. Grab this bun. The build it button, where do we want the build it button? Let's make it just like in the other example. I will de-round the corners because I can. And this is gonna change to add to cart. Let's make it a little bit smaller. Perfect. All right, so again, we are positioning all of this stuff on our artboard so that it explodes when we animate. Beautiful. Now, how do you actually create this animation, right? So if I go to prototype mode up in the top, again, you can use your Control Tab key to switch between the two. I'm simply going to select this artboard here, the first state in this animation. I'm going to press on, actually I should probably, before I do that, I forgot to group my button. You don't have to group your button, but I want to make sure things are organized, and it makes it a little bit easier to click on. And I'm going to name this. Now here's I'm going to get to an important point in a second. I'm going to name this button, or build it. Now, because I just grouped it on the first artboard, and it's not grouped on the second artboard, it might confuse Adobe XD. So what you have to make sure to do is make sure everything is kind of up to date on both artboards if you do make changes like this. So in this one, I'm going to make sure to group the button at the bottom and just name it exactly the way it was on the first artboard. Perfect, okay. So now back in prototype mode, I have the button selected, and there's this blue handle at the bottom. And if I drag this over to the second artboard, I'm basically telling Adobe XD I want a transition of some sort to happen from once someone clicks on that button and it's gonna do whatever is chosen in the second artboard. So it's gonna be a tap, and it's not gonna be a transition, but it's gonna be an auto-animate. And we have a bunch of easing options. We can do ease in, ease out, snap, wind up, or bounce. Let's try snap. We can always try a few different ones. And now if I press the play button to preview this and press, I hope this is gonna work. Woo! And it flies out. You even notice the button at the bottom kind of enlarged itself, repositioned itself. The text changed. Let me show you that one more time. Press it, the burger flies out. It kind of snaps into place. And you also have, let's try some, there's the bounce animation. Kind of bounces at the top. It's a little bit, for this example, it's a little bit firm, I guess you can call it. I'm not really feeling that bounce animation. It's not terrible, but it doesn't fit. I think snap could be cool. Wind up basically starts, if the burger's like this, it will go a little bit inwards and then it'll expand. So if I do that, it goes in and then out. That's not bad either, but I'm gonna do snap. Snap. And if we take a look at this one, it's similar, but we also have on the side, we have some text layers, right? Needs a stretch with that squash, indeed. So what we're going to do, we'll add those text layers. We're gonna move this over to the right, and let's add some text layers. So we have a bun. Make this a little bit smaller. Make sure that's left justified. We have ketchup. Yeah, let's definitely make these a bit smaller. Bun, ketchup. This is gonna be embarrassing. Did I spell that right? Oh, we do have spell check. I always spell lettuce wrong, but I guess I spelled it right. But there's also spell check in Adobe XD now, which is fantastic. So if you're like me and spell lettuce wrong all the time, there we go. Pickles, cheese, and meat. All right. Now, of course, these are not really aligned properly, but you get the idea. So, and what we could, actually, you know what we could do? I can select all of these, and I can make sure they're lined up with this lovely icon right at the top. If I hover over, it is distribute vertically, and it'll make sure all of those are lined up nicely. Beautiful. I can also use a repeat grid, but we won't get into that right now. So we have these on our second artboard, but we also need these on our first artboard. So I'm gonna just simply copy them. Let me group them first. Text, whatever. And then I'll put them over here, and I'm gonna just set the opacity of this group to 0. And I'll move them over to the side a little bit. So now when I play this, it expands, the text comes in, the opacity changes, and now we have our second artboard, which is great. Now, if we go back to this example that we're kind of recreating, there's a state where they're actually grabbing one of the ingredients and sliding it over to the right. And we kind of want to replicate that as well. And that is where drag comes in to this example. So I'm going to duplicate this artboard over to the right. And let's say, I'm not a big fan of pickles, so I'm gonna get rid of the pickles. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna select the pickle layer. I'm simply gonna drag it over to the right. And you're noticing it's still part of this artboard. A lot of times you might run into a situation where you drag something off of an artboard, but it goes onto the paste board. And the reason it doesn't do that in this example is because the pickles are part of a group that has elements on the artboard still. So it will not escape onto the pasteboard, which is great. And also do the same thing for pickles, drag that over here as well. And now we want to make sure to collapse all these. So I'm going to grab my lettuce, my ketchup, and my buns. Move that down. Cheese, meat, buns, move that up. And we just want to make sure that these are moved up. Lettuce, ketchup, bun. Beautiful. So we have our third state now, and the drag animation is just as simple as the other animation. So if I go into prototype mode and I select the pickle layer in specific, drag out my handle over to the right to the artboard, and instead of tap for the trigger, no more pickles, Anel, sorry. I'm not a big fan of pickles. They did look like cucumbers. I can select drag instead of tap for the trigger. And again, I do want to do auto-animate. Not too worried about the easing, but you could do in and out if you wanted to. Let's actually do ease out. Let's see what happens. So, back on this artboard, press play. Let me zoom in so we can really see this in action. If I press build it, it expands, the burger explodes, the text kind of slides in from the left, the button at the bottom expands and changes to add to cart. And then if I didn't like the pickles, I can simply drag the pickles off. And you're noticing it's auto-animating as I'm moving it. So I can go back and forth and I can just drag it off. And we now have our new updated burger. That worked out really well. Again, I haven't done this yet. It was like a last minute decision to kind of replicate this, but that was kind of cool. Let's do that one more time just because I'm so fascinated by this example. Build it, burger explodes, don't like the pickles, goodbye pickles. Cool. So, we have our build it section. So let's go back, now that that's kind of out of the way, let's go back and add, I'm gonna move this over here. Cool stuff, yeah, I know, that was pretty cool. The amazing, you can do so much with, I've been playing with auto-animate for a few months now as it's kind of weaned into development, and the stuff that we've been creating internally and the stuff that we've already seen customers create publicly is just mind-blowing. It's really cool. Let me hop back into design mode. And I'm going to create one more artboard over here. Whoops, not over there. Over here. And this is going to be basically the details section for, actually, you know what? I'm not going to create that artboard. I'm going to duplicate the menu and drag it over here. Because we basically want when someone clicks on one of the burgers, it expands and has a few different options. So in this case, we actually want to break this repeat grid because at this point, we can't just grab this because if we make this larger, they're all going to grow larger because that's the point of repeat grid. But at this stage, we're kind of okay with the repeat grid being broken. So I'm going to break it into, on both of these artboards, and these guys at the bottom, I'm going to move down a little bit and turn down the opacity all the way. And this one, I'm going to make larger, just like that. And we'll have a button at the bottom. Actually, you know what? I'm going to grab my add to cart button, copy it, and put it right over here. Beautiful. And we may want some customization options. So we're going to add some text. And I'm not being very consistent with my capitalization. Here it's not capitalized, here it is capitalized, but what can you do? Make this a little bit smaller, line it up somewhere around there. And underneath, we're going to create another repeat grid. So this will be, let's say, you don't want mayo or you do want mayo, one of those two. Do you like mayo on your burgers? I sometimes do. It depends on the burger. Make this a little bit smaller. Pop it right there. And then over to the right, I'm going to add basically a checkbox. Melody likes mayo. Yeah, it really depends on the burger. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Oops. I'm going to make a border of 2. So that will be a checkbox. Let's make it a little bit gray. There we go. So now I have both of these layers. Let me make sure this is left justified. It is. And I can Command or Control R to create a repeat. Where's the bacon? That's a good question, Jason. Was there bacon in this? Oh, there is. I should have added bacon. Anyways. So we have a repeat grid, and we can just drag this down to add a few elements. Let me squeeze this a little bit closer together. And this will be pickles, bacon just for you, Jason, and onions. So now there's a customize option when you are creating your burger. There we go. Now into prototype mode, if I select just this burger, drag it over, this is going to be a tap. It's going to be auto-animate, and will snap into place. And if we press play, you'll notice the text and the button just simply appear because they weren't really present on the previous artboards, which is fine because in this example, we just basically want it to appear. We could add a copy of it to the previous artboard and turn down the opacity and move it somewhere so that it does kind of animate into place. But in this case, it's okay if it just kind of appears. But the main point of this was that at the top, the burger, the image kind of expands, fills the screen, and the text moves as well. And I may want to have the text move a little bit away from the edge. Just like that. Just makes very small tweaks. And you can add another artboard with some checked boxes here if you wanted to. But we also, yeah, there we go. So looking at this, we also want to make sure to link up. So we have our menu and we have our burger. We want to make sure to link up this over here to this screen here. We could have it, tap is good, auto animate. Probably don't need an auto animation because there's no elements to really animate, right? And then in transition, we'll have it slide from the, or let's say push from the right, or push to the right, and it will ease in and out. Beautiful. And then from this screen, we'll make sure to go back to the menu, and it keeps the same transitions that I had selected last time, and do the same thing here and here. Fantastic. Now, before we wrap up, I do want to touch, and let's very quickly take a look at this, but I want to touch on some of the voice stuff that we introduced as well, which is really exciting. So if I have, I'm playing this now, here's the burger. I don't have that linked up. Whoops. But I can switch over to make it yours, build it, it expands, get rid of those pickles, and we have our updated burger, right? So I want to touch a little bit on some of the voice stuff. And this is always fun to demo the voice features live. I'm going to hop into icons, just look for a microphone. There we go, there's a little microphone. And maybe I'll put this up here on this artboard. I'll change this to white. So essentially, this app may have voice controls, right? And if a user presses on this microphone icon, it will take in a command and go over to a different screen. So, hopping into prototype mode, I have my microphone selected, and for this example, I may want to be able to say something like, let me build a burger or something like that. So I can grab this handle, drag it over to the Make It Yours section, and instead of tap or drag, we're actually going to select voice. And at this point, it's going to ask for a command. So let's make a burger, right? And then the action will be, we'll do transition, and we will do push right. We'll keep all those options the same. Now, if I press play on this artboard, I have all the same options I can do before. I can click and I can scroll and all that stuff, but I can also use my voice. And at the bottom, you can see it says hold down your space bar while speaking to use voice commands. So if I hold down my space bar and say, let's make a burger, it should transition to the next screen. Let's make a burger. I haven't activated my microphone yet. There we go. Let's make a burger. Or I said build a burger, didn't I? Let's build a burger. Let's try that again. Let's build a burger. Aha. So just with my voice, it was able to transition to the next screen. And what I can also do, if I wanted to continue that going, I can add a transition, let's say, to the pickles. Instead of a drag effect, I can add a voice effect. Get rid of the pickles. And it can auto-animate just like it could before. So if I press play, get rid of the pickles. So it's super cool, the stuff you can do with voice. It's kind of silly, but it works. And you can also have speech playback as well. So let me turn hopefully my audio is working. But once you've transitioned from this screen to this screen here, I can select the entire artboard. I can click on the handle to the right. And instead of all of this stuff, I'm going to choose time. Make sure it's a delay of 0 seconds, because I essentially want, right when it transitions to this artboard, I want it to be able to speak something back. So 0 seconds, the action is going to be speech playback. And this is what the assistant is going to speak back to me. So let's say, great, let's build your burger. Fantastic. And now, if I go back here, let's build a burger. I'm not sure if that worked. I know it should have worked, but my audio is linked to the... Paco, did you hear anything?
Yeah, so go to settings.
Oh, okay.
So we can go to audio and just do it so place to your speakers. Yeah, so system preferences.
Oh, okay.
Audio.
Did anyone out there hear that?
And then go to output. And make sure, yeah, let's do that.
Okay, let's try this again.
And then turn it up on your Mac, make sure we have volume.
All right, here we go. Let's build a burger.
Great. Let's build your burger.
Aha. See? So you can not only have voice triggers, but you can also have speech playback. So you can pretty much create an end-to-end solution just with your voice. And we've already seen some incredible stuff. We've been working with Amazon on some stuff, and soon you'll be able to test out your prototypes directly on an Echo, which is really cool. So it's great for assistance or any other sort of application you might be working on that requires voice. So just to wrap up, we built a screen, a home screen, very simple, just with a button, which I probably should have prototyped. Drag this over to this screen. And then we built a menu using repeat grids. We added a detail screen with the burger so you can customize it as well. And then we added this really fun, let me get rid of the speech on this one. We added this really fun exploding burger. And let me go ahead and add the drag. Okay, I did. And when you press build it, the burger explodes. You can grab pickles and drag it over to the right to get rid of them. So this has been fun. So I hope you guys all learned something in this hour went by very quickly. For Adobe XD, definitely jump in there, use some of the new features, use some of the old features, and if you have been designing in Photoshop or Illustrator, bring those files in, and you can just continue working. And once it's all said and done, you can actually go up to the top. You can publish your prototype, you can publish design specs, but what's cool about publishing a prototype is you can then, once a link has been generated, you can then publish that directly on Behance, and your viewers will be able to click and do all the fun stuff to navigate throughout the prototype, and you can share it with the world and get feedback. So I hope you've all learned something. Hope you all jump into Adobe XD. Make sure to tweet at us all your fun auto-animate or just prototypes in general. And stay tuned this week. We have a huge week of Adobe Live UI and UX coming up. I'll see you all tomorrow. See ya.